So this obviously needs rear brakes. You can see it's all wet and oily. There's some fresh grease. Somebody was in there recently, did something with the wheel bearings, because that's a brand new retainer, and that's a brand new cotter pin. But don't people know how to grease these things? Look at this. There's hardly any grease in here. They just put a grease around the actual rollers of the bearings, but nothing else. That inner drum channel should have some grease in there. Oh well. I don't know if you guys seen one of these before, but it's basically a mechanical a digital stethoscope with which you can detect operation of stuff. So this is a fuel injector clicking. If I put it on the valve cover, you can see it doesn't really pick anything up. There's a sensitivity control here. There's a PCV valve down here. If I put my I got it right on the PCV valve, and you can hear it beeping. If I put the needle onto the hose on the top of the valve, nothing happens. If I put it on the bottom of the hose, nothing happens. If I put it right on the valve, the body, sorry. So that PCV valve is opening and closing as it should. Here's a quick, easy one. Customer complains about some kind of a pump running when he shuts the engine off, causing the battery to drain. Once we had some juice back on the battery, or in the battery was dead. We heard the secondary air running. So then we went over here. There's the engine computer. You got to take this cover off. This is the secondary air pump relay. I installed a generic one right now. As soon as I disconnected or pulled the stock relay out, the pump stopped. The way the system works is there's power all the time on this wire here. That's the load side, meaning the pump, and then the control side. With the engine off, there should obviously not be any type of control on this relay. So basically what is happening is, if I get a chance, I'll take the relay apart. But this is the used one here. Just for testing. But what happens is that the points over time stick, so the pump gets activated, and then even though it's de-energized, the points stick, and then the pump always runs, and that causes the battery to drain. And new relay will solve this. And here's another good example of one of my drain screws. You can see how dry it is. It's obviously been a while since the last oil change. So people who are concerned about this being a boost leak, obviously, be it being dry, there is no leak. On the other hand, you can see here there's oil right here. Usually what happens is that this plastic air duct that directs air into the intercooler, it rubs into the core, and then you get oil coming out. Sorry, it's hard to see, but this is basically leaking boost, not to the point to set a code yet, but it will set a MAF code most likely eventually, due to the air coming out and more air being drawn through the MAF than expected. Forgot to take the screw out so you can see that oil will most likely come out. This is the BEW engine, so it probably won't be as much as on an ALH. This one's good. There's a little tiny bit that's wanting to come out. I consider this good. Most of it has probably been blowing out the side. Another TDI with the same problem. You can see oil along the air ducting right here. So the plastic is cutting into the intercooler core, and then oil gets blown out because of, well, when the vehicle's running under boost. Here's my drain plug. I'm just going to pull it out. So the plug is oily because the cooler is leaking. So you can see there's still some oil in here. And when looking at the cooler from the top, I took out the little grill. You can see how oily it is. All the dirt is sticking to it, but the plastic right here is cutting into the core. You can't see it, but I might get a better look. I might take a better picture later, but that's what's happening, is the oil is getting blown out of there. I didn't notice it earlier, but you can see the dirt collecting, but in the corner here you can see there's no dirt, it's clean. Let me turn the camera a little bit. You can see that's clean, and that's where the air is pushing out. And you can see the plastic there and the aluminum. It's cutting into the aluminum, and now you've got an air leak. When it gets big enough, it'll set a MAF sensor fault code, P0101, I think. Implausible signal. That's because more air is going through the MAF sensor than expected because of the leak right there. 2016 Touareg. Customer just bought it, wants us to check it over. 5,318. Enough said. Intake cleaning 5 years ago, and it's actually looking pretty clean in there still. And I remembered resetting the EGR maximum allowable, so it actually does work. And I know this customer is a city driver, so in terms of low speed stop and go, which is the main reason for intake carboning up. If they were to drive at higher speeds, higher RPM, more consistently, there would be less soot buildup, or at least from my experience. Timing belt 5 years ago, same time, most likely. Well, no, obviously not, because that's August and that's October. But anyways, check those intakes, and when you clean the intakes, reset the maximum allowable EGR. 2003 Jetta, radiator fans are not coming on. Thermostat is opening, lower hose is warm. Already bypassed or disconnected both fans and gave them power and ground. None of them work. The radiator fan switch, sorry about the lighting, is hooked up right now, and I've got my test light hooked up to one of the radiator fan plugs. So right now the radiator is warm, the thermal radiator fan switch is warm, and that's why that light is on. So everything is working except for the fans. It needs a couple of fans. On the A4s, Mark IVs, in order to get to the fan control module, you just remove the wheel well liner, and this side plastic trim, and you've got access to the fan module and the radiator fan switch, as well as the two radiator fan harness plugs. So you can do your testing from above or below. Disconnect the thermo switch or the radiator fan switch. Check for power on one of those wires. If it doesn't have AC, then there is no fan module. So basically, disconnect this one, bridge across the power and a low speed, see if low speeds fan operate. If they do, check high speed. If they do, that's great. If the fans don't come on, it's because the fan switch is bad or because the radiator is not getting hot, in which case check thermostat operation and water pump operation. If everything checks out fine in terms of power, but you got no fan operation, then obviously check your wiring. You need to make sure that there's continuity from that switch to these harness plugs. And then also for your high speed, you could have corroded terminals in here, so disconnect the plugs and check for corrosion, and that's it. You know, only so much guessing I can do. You need a test light to sort things out, or at least to follow the power. If you have power going in, then you should have power coming out when the fan switch is warm enough. And like I said, if the fan doesn't get warm, or if the switch doesn't get warm, then you probably have a flow issue. Figured I would make a video about this since some people have run into problems with this. When replacing these sensors, they're held in with a C-clip. It can only go in one way. It's supposed to go in sideways like this. A lot of people try to force it through the single opening, so trying to push it in like this, it's never going to fit. So you have to put it in with the slots. There's a slot here and a slot there, and you just push it in that way. I know it seems trivial, but I've had a couple of people struggle with the clip until they realized what was going on. And if you're replacing sensors, obviously you just remove it and install it in the same way that removal is in reverse of removal. That's what I was trying to say. So if you take the clip out in this direction, you can put it back in this direction, or you can put it in from this side, but you can't go this way. Same with this one. You're taking it out this way. This way you can't, because the cylinder head is in the way, and you can't force it this way because it just won't fit through the hole. It's simple, but yes, it can cause some confusion. B6, B7 Passats, the sunroof drains are underneath the windshield here. Got to remove the plastic cowling or whatever you want to call it, and you can see there's a drain tube right here, and it's got the pinched tip. So what you want to do is cut them open. You just reach in there with some side cutters, whichever way you can, and then just cut the tip off. And that ensures that things don't get plugged. This one is dry right now, but earlier I pushed against it with a screwdriver and it was full of water. On this side, you have to remove this duct here that covers the fresh air intake. On this one, you can get to it easier. And this one will probably have some water coming out, or at least I hope, because the water is coming out inside of the car. There we go. Now it's free flowing. Sorry, I forgot to mention cleanup afterwards. This is obviously some kind of a nest here. Somebody's nesting in here, nice and cozy. Hopefully they're still not in there or asleep. But basically just take a vacuum cleaner in there, maybe clean it out once a year. Sorry, one more thing. You got to make sure that those fender drains are clear. On the driver's side, under this piece of plastic, that this drain is clear. On the passenger side, this big opening needs to be open. Okay, Farvergnügen. On the 1.8T Passats, if you want to take the alternator out, take the throttle body out. I think I've shown this before in a separate video, but I think I didn't zoom in on how to hold this fan clutch pulley. You just insert a chisel or a punch, a centering punch, tapered punch, and then that holds the pulley, that holds this piece here, and then you can loosen the bolt that's tucked in behind there. Sorry, butterfingers. So this just sits in here. There's a hole in the pulley that a punch can sit through. Of course not. There it is, right there. So you just rotate the pulley. First you slacken off the belt, the tensioner right here, 17 millimeter. Remove the belt, that way you can move the pulley freely. Insert the punch, 8 millimeter hex or Allen in the back here. Once that bolt is out, you can slide this pulley and fan clutch forward, and then that'll give you access to the lower alternator bolt right there, which is an 8mm. The upper one is a 6. Ever since I was in for the oil change, my valve stem cap is missing. You guys ever hear that story from customers? You know, they were just in for an oil service or whatever, and now their cap is missing. In most cases, you can tell if there was a cap on it. Here you can see how clean the threads are and the dirt in behind. So if I saw this, then I would say yes, there's a cap missing, or that went missing recently. I've had this so many times where the customer comes back maybe a week or even 2 months later and says, ever since, and there was never a cap on there to begin with. And I used to always write it down on the work order, valve stem cap missing, but then I got tired of it. So then you go to Amazon and you get yourself a whole bunch of valve stem caps, $8 I think for 100, or maybe 14 for 100. No more issue. I don't even bother telling the boss, because it's you know, customers like that. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where valve stem caps go missing, and people have to realize that it's people stealing them. It's not the technician, the mechanic, not putting it back on. I see Volkswagen emblems getting stolen. Well, I don't see it happening, but you know, people taking hubcaps because they're too cheap to buy their own. Such is life these days. It's not the mechanic. It's not always the mechanic that's trying to screw you over. And if you did forget to put it on, what's the big deal? You come back to the shop and you be polite about it, and you get yourself a new cap. That's it. That's my rant.